let's talk policy before we talk controversy. I'm just looking at some of the differences between what the Senate's version for the tax overhaul looks like versus the House. And the only area that I can see where they actually correspond is on doubling the standard deduction, which suggests issues for me. Sahil.
Sure. So that's one of the issues where they have similarities. There are some others where they have similarities, too. The House bill restores the adoption tax credit that they initially contemplated taking out. There are a number of differences, though. The top tax rate in the Senate bill is 38.5%. The House keeps theirs at 39.6%. The House bill does not eliminate the state and local tax deduction entirely. It keeps an exemption for property taxes to appease some of its members from New York, New Jersey, and California. The Senate bill eliminates SALT entirely. That's a major difference. The biggest one, as you mentioned, is a corporate tax. The corporate tax rate taking effect. The Senate bill delays it by 1 year. That goes against what President Trump and a number of Republican leaders have said in terms of wanting, the corporate tax cut to happen immediately because they believe it'll lead to more economic growth.
Sahil, I mean, there are obviously, as you spell out, there are differences between the House and Senate bill, but this is sort of standard legislative process. When you look at the two bills, how do they seem particularly wide apart, or does this sort of seem like standard differences that then could get ironed out in conference?
Well, there are always differences between what the House and the Senate wants to do, and sure, in theory, they can try to combine these differences. To try to sort out these differences and combine one. The question is where these pressure points are and how big the margins are. In the Senate, for instance, the bill does not repeal the estate tax. That is something that many House Republicans feel very strongly about. That is something that Susan Collins and Mike Rounds have told us they don't want to do. So the question is, can you craft a bill in conference committee that can pass both chambers? But I do think, Joe, that may be getting a little bit ahead of ourselves because the Senate has yet to pass this bill. It's not clear that they have 50 out of 52 Republicans who are going to, get it through the chamber.
And we're seeing the House Ways and Means Committee there talking up their bill because they have advanced it. Kevin Brady with the blue tie there standing next to the current speaker. Sahil, let me go back to the differences between the two tax bills here, because to what extent does that even matter, given that it's likely that they'll be voting on the Senate version? That will be the version that will more likely make it to the president's desk.
Well, so far as we know, and this is, I think, is very important, the Senate bill itself may not necessarily be compliant with Senate rules. Senate rules require that any tax cut that's permanent pay for itself after the 10th year in the budget window, and we haven't seen enough in the Senate bill to know that it does. By all indications, it probably doesn't, because there are some pretty steep tax cuts and not an abundance of revenue raisers in there. So even if they do craft this, even if the House passes its bill as Kevin McCarthy, the majority whip over there, says they will vote on it next week, even if it does come over to the Senate, it's dead on arrival under Senate rules. They need to change it pretty substantially to get it to where it needs to be.